G'day Internet, Max right here, and a really fun clip today from Michael Saylor. And it's going to really, we're going to talk a lot about courage. We're going to talk about what it takes to be successful in this life, and I think you're going to really enjoy it. Before I do, public service announcement, there's a new type of scam in the comments. They're asking you to reply to them inside the comments, and then they'll reach out to you. Don't fall for it. They stole my photo, they've stole my name, but if you're on my channel, then this comes up as a gray, it just comes up different. And it's not me. I never, ever solicit for people to reach out to me in the comment. Just don't do it, okay? So be mindful of that scam. All right, on to fun stuff. Michael Saylor, let's go ahead and listen to it.
So when you did this, Michael, what was the reaction that you got from current investors in your fund and prospective investors you were trying to get them to invest? What was their reaction to you putting a significant portion of the portfolio into Bitcoin?
So I do want to interrupt, just so you know what we're talking about. We're talking about back when Michael Saylor, what he had to go through to change MicroStrategy's documents and inform shareholders that they were going to change their treasury strategy to hold a hell of a lot of Bitcoin. So we're going back in time. And I think it's important to understand, what does it take for corporations and Fortune 500 companies to actually do that? You're going to get, it's a lot. You'll see why ETFs and other things like that are so important.
Everybody goes through this learning process, and first people, if I'd done this before March of 2020, they would have said you're out of your mind. But if you'd asked me about this in February of 2020, I would have said, why even asking me this? I wouldn't have even considered it. So I think that people weren't ready to embrace this idea before March of 2020. But after March of 2020, if you said, hey, I have an idea, I think everybody will work from home and we'll Zoom everywhere, and I'm going to try something new in my business, you would have said, well, there's a war on COVID. It's a difficult time. I guess you got to try new things. So I think that people became more open-minded after March. We started from a point of view of open-mindedness. My board was open-minded, but it took them a while to get educated. And then with our outside investors, we didn't know how they would view it. We're a public company, so we took the safest course. We created a Dutch auction, and we telegraphed what we're going to do. And we said, this is our strategy. If you don't like it, we'll buy you out. And we waited 20 days. And by the way, we offered the Dutch auction at 140 a share. The stock was trading 120. The stock traded between 130 and 140 for a while. People weren't sure the auction was going to go off. And then they came to their senses and they're like, wait a minute, the 140 is a put. The stock should be above 140. Then it traded above 140. And we didn't know whether we'd have 250 million tendered or nothing. And we only got 60 million tendered. So what that tells you is, at the end of the day, all but $60 million worth of the shareholders decided that they liked the strategy, or at least they would try it. And they tried it in the 150, and then the stock went to 160, and then it went to 180, and then it went.
So I just want to pause there so you all understand what happened. In order for them to change the strategy, so the treasury strategy of MicroStrategy, remember MicroStrategy is a business, it has a product, it has cash flows, it has revenues, it has profits, it has costs, all those things. All those things stay exactly the same. They changed their treasury strategy. What's a treasury strategy? Well, all the money that comes in, they're sitting on a pool of profits. What do? We give it out in dividends? Do we do it, buy up our own stock? All the options that they normally have. They wanted to change their treasury strategy to, we're just going to put it all in Bitcoin. And for that, that's a fundamental change to the business strategy and the business treasury strategy. And so what they said, so they didn't upset any shareholders, so no one got blindsided. They came out and said, hey, the stock is currently trading at $1.20. We'll buy it off you from $1.40. And so if you think this is bad news, and if this is bad news, and if the market tanks, and if no one wants to be involved in our company because we're moving to a Bitcoin strategy, we guarantee we'll buy it for 140, even though the stock is 120. And so that is this process they had to go through in order to inform the shareholders that they were changing their treasury strategy. So that way they didn't create any bad people. So you can understand, now this particular company, MicroStrategy, I think something in the order of 60% of the stock is held by Michael Saylor. So, there's a fair amount of insulation there that, there's not this, at least 60% of the shareholders are going to stay. We know that. And so other shareholders are a lot more evenly distributed. There's no big shareholder, and so it's a bit riskier for other businesses to do it. I would say the vast majority of other businesses, it's a lot riskier for them to do this kind of strategy. And so now it turned out that, generally only $60 million worth of shareholders said, no, we're out, peace out, give me the puts, give me the put at $1.40. But that's just so you understand, that is what is going on when a company needs to make this big announcement and change their treasury strategy, which is what needed to happen previously. But now we are into the world of ETFs, albeit a futures ETF. It's not perfect, but it's there. And with that, the company charters generally are already allowed to allocate towards ETFs. So nothing special needs to happen. So you can understand just how big a deal the ETFs are. All right, let's go back to Michael.
200. And then around 220, I think Citron wrote some kind of report on Bitcoin. And then people started thinking that, well, maybe this wasn't a bad idea after all. This might start working. And if you asked the shareholders how they felt about it then, they would have given you a different answer than during the Dutch auction. Let me tell you, I met with 10 shareholders during the Dutch auction now. 9 of the 10 were positive, and I went into one meeting, and my head of investor relations said, this person's really not liking this strategy. He's asked a lot of questions about it, so get ready for a difficult meeting. And so I went in there all suited up for battle, and he said, tell me about Bitcoin. And I said, well, it's a digital monetary network, and we want to use it as a currency inflation hedge, blah, blah, blah. And this is technically why I like it. Oh, yeah, I already know all that. I own Bitcoin. Why you beating me up on this? And then he wasn't. And then I thought, why are my investor relations people telling me to be worried? And what I realized is Bitcoin is one of those things where everybody just kind of feels the need to ask the question, have you thought it through? And so this guy's asking the question so he can tell his investment committee that he did his due diligence. And my investor relations people are asking the question so they can say they did their due diligence. And my lawyers and my lawyers' lawyers are asking questions so they could all check the box that they did due diligence. But when you poked, I got to tell you, I met so many people that after they said, how are you going to do it? How are you going to custody it? How you think? They're like, oh yeah, good idea. I own Bitcoin. And so I think the consumers figured it out, but getting the institutions around, it's like I met guys that bought $25 million worth of my stock or worth of my debt. And it was the first time they had the ability to buy a Bitcoin security, but they had been Bitcoin believers for years before. And so institutions come later to the game than the retail, just because there's more inertia. When electricity came along, if I knocked on doors in New York City and I said, hey, I got electricity, lightning in a bottle, you can put it in your, in your house, in your ship, in your, sewing machine factory, in your restaurant. Are you ready? People in the first year aren't going to get that one either. Right? Someone's going to burn their house down. Someone's going to get electrocuted. Something's going to catch fire. Someone's going to say, don't let that guy put that in my neighborhood. Could you imagine going into your apartment in New York City in 1905 and saying, I want my apartment to be the first one wired for electricity? So I mean, the point is, other major breakthroughs in energy also took decades. And it's totally reasonable that maybe the lone investor, they go first, and the small business, and then the larger business, and then the small city, and then the larger city, and then the company, and everybody finds their way.
Wow, there's so much. We'll get to that news clipping in just a minute. Don't worry. If you missed it, we'll come back to it. But there's so much in there. There's so much history in there. There's so many things to learn. So something I teach my 6-year-old son all the time is about courage, the value of courage. And actually, you know what? We'll come back to that. I really want you to stick around for this. This is super, super important life lessons here. I'll come back to that first because it dovetails into this other point. So he made a couple of very, very important points there. And one of them is career risk, right? And he talked about how he's got this idea and he found out people were asking all these really tough questions and they were hammering him and have you thought about this? Have you thought about this? And then afterwards they found out they all had Bitcoin themselves. It's like, why are we having this conversation as if you've never heard of Bitcoin? And he reveals the answer. It's like they just needed to tick the box and say they did their due diligence. They were covered. There was some paperwork involved, et cetera, et cetera. Now, that's one level. That's just being prudent in one way. It's just like, making sure those boxes are ticked. But let's talk about this career risk stuff. Right now, the world is being crippled by risk-adverse people. Absolutely crippled. And in the world of Bitcoin, this career risk thing is imminent. Because I know you guys love hearing about Bitcoin. You love hearing about is the price of Bitcoin going up or down. So let's tie that in right here, right now. And then we'll go on to maybe bigger topics. But the career risk for people, for CEOs, CFOs, family businesses, for everybody on the planet, the career risk to show up one day at work and say, hey, I think we should allocate 5, 10, 15, 20, 30% of our portfolio to Bitcoin. Like 10 years ago, 7 years ago, 5 years ago, the risk of walking in and making that statement is just through the roof. Like, you can be fired on the spot for being so reckless for mentioning it, right? Let alone if you actually convinced your company to put their toe in the water and allocate 1% to Bitcoin. Nobody else is doing it. And if the price of Bitcoin goes down in 3, 6, 9 months after you said that, like, that's grounds for dismissal. Why are you coming to us with such a crazy, risky idea? This is not what these big institutions want. We can't sell this to our shareholders. We can't sell this to our bosses. And people can get fired over this stuff. But then some people with courage step in. And they say, people who are CFOs, and like Michael, who's the CEO here, Michael Saylor, and in the luxurious position of owning, I think, something in the order of 60% of his own company. And he says, this is going to be our treasury strategy. We've got to figure out a way to do it. Team, let's get on it. He comes in with courage. And then all the other people he's got to convince, they all ask him these questions and he signed the piece of paper that said, I do my due diligence, let me eliminate career risk, right? It's the person with courage that is reaping the benefit. We'll come back to that a little bit more again later, but let's go back to career risk. Every single day, there's a new hedge fund saying we're going to do this. The world's best hedge fund owners, they are now into crypto. Some of the biggest, the planet's biggest pension funds, they're like saying, hey, we want to be involved in crypto now. The conversations are happening, and like dominoes, as every single one of those dominoes hit, then what you get is it becomes easier and easier for people to come into their boardroom and say, let's do this. As an individual, all you got to do is satisfy yourself and your spouse, maybe if you have one, and you're off to the races. Go for it. But these corporations, there's careers, there's incomes, there's salaries on the line. And every single day that goes past, just the career risk plummets. And people can say, listen, so I made a bad call. I've made bad calls in the past. I said, let's go into natural gas. I said, let's go into oil. I said, let's go into this. And the prices went down. I didn't get fired for it. And listen, Bitcoin's here. There's people, some of the best people in the world are interested in it now. So the career risk is gone. It might be a winning bet. It might be a losing bet in the short term or long term. No one knows. But the career risk is plummeting, which gives people confidence to step in and have those conversations. And for that reason, that to me is the biggest factor in the world of when these institutions are coming on. There's the mechanics and the legalities and how easy it is for them to custody and the things you have to go through, like during the Dutch auction, like Michael Saylor did. So all these things take place. Okay, cool. But really, it's about career risk. And that, if you could plot that career risk, it's just plummeting on a chart. Absolutely plummeting. So that's a comment on career risk. Now I want to talk a little bit about courage. Something I teach my 6-year-old is that just basic supply and demand, that which is in limited supply has more value. And we have a chronic shortage of courage at the moment. I teach him this all the time. The other day he got injured. He fell off his bike. We went to the ER. And before we got in there, I said, so here's what's going to happen. The doctor is going to come in here and say, he's going to put a Band-Aid on it. And they're going to say, listen, this is I think it's just fine. I've cleaned it out. Everything is probably 99% chance going to be fine. But I'm going to go and send you to and get an MRI. Right? And then they're going to send us up to some more expensive hospital. And then we're going to go ahead and do that. And then what we're going to do is we're going to go there and they're going to take the scans and whatever else. And then they're going to say, hey, listen, everything looks good, but just to be safe, I think we should do the next level of thing and spend thousands of dollars more. And as we walked into the doctor's office, this is exactly what happened. Three tiers, like medical professionals, trained doctors looking at this wound. It was not wound in his abdomen here. And it played out exactly. And for his benefit, my son's benefit, I just peppered them with questions. And what happened was they just said, yeah, like I recommend going and spending thousands of dollars on this extra scan. They didn't have any idea of my financial position. They knew I didn't have insurance. I don't have insurance. I self-insure. They just recommended thousands upon thousands of dollars of scans because why? Their career risk. They were able to outsource the cost of them doing a good job by saying, I recommend going and spend thousands of dollars on a scan to make sure I don't get any career risk. They didn't care. It doesn't matter if it was $1 million a scan. They don't care because they're not paying the cost. They're not weighing the benefits. They're just saying, I'm going to tell you to go do a scan. And if you don't understand that, and there would have been people who just don't understand that and who can't afford it, and it would have gone and put themselves in thousands of dollars of debt to get an MRI scan on a little scratch. Why? Why? Because this person is trying to avoid career risk. And these poor people, and how many people do these doctors see in a day? And it's not just one doctor, it's the tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of doctors there are in this country. Every single one of them, the word I taught my son was they punt. Hey, yeah, I came to a doctor. I've got an injury. Is it okay? Is it not okay? Does it need more anything? I don't know. Punt. Go to someone more expensive. It's never ending. It happens in the school boards. It happens in the CDC. It happens in everywhere. Like the data out of Florida is blindingly obvious, right? No lockdowns, no masks, has the lowest rate of COVID intake, COVID hospitalizations in the country, right? It's worthless. But is the person at the CDC, do they pay the cost of telling millions of people to not go to work tomorrow? No. Do they pay the cost of the irritation of wearing masks? Do they pay the cost of paying for the drugs to inject in everybody? They don't pay any of those costs. Do they get a benefit? Yeah, they avoid career risk. Yeah. If they don't do it, and lots of people get sick, they have career risk. If they tell you to spend an infinite amount of money and jump through an infinite number of hurdles, doing an infinitely number of stupid things that cost the country trillions of dollars, that's no problem for them. They're not paying that bill. The only thing they're worried about is career risk. So we are drowning in a world of people avoiding career risk. We are drowning in a world of lack of courage. And it's especially hideous and it's especially heinous. And reason number 7,225 why big government always fails is because that you have people who can outsource the cost of their idiotic decisions just to save themselves a little bit of career risk. They will make you go poor. They will make you starve to death in the end, which is where it gets to, every single time so they keep their job at the bureaucracy. That is how it happens. That is why big government always fails. Reason number 7,000 and whatever I said. It fails for a million different reasons. But that's a big one. It's a big one that I don't hear spoken about often. So again, what do I teach my son? That which is in limited supply has enormous value. Now, in your private life, the question is, do you have courage? Do you have courage? If you have courage, that's one of the things I love about Bitcoin. The people who have the courage to do this new thing, to see the writing on the wall and have that conversation with themselves, with their spouse, and make those investments, boom, they're inheriting the earth. The people who bought Bitcoin in 2011, 12, 13, 14, they're all millionaires. Their all lives completely changed. They're inheriting the earth because they have the courage. My question for you is, do you have the courage? And I promise to go back to it. There's not often I've been a student of history and political history and liberty versus tyranny for a very long time. And I haven't, it's not often I get shown a new piece of history, but one of my customers sent me something. Where is it? We're here. I wanted to go back to this. Let's just read this quote. So this was said 73 years ago. It's a quote from 1994. Well, I didn't do the math, so it's not 73 years ago anymore. It's even more. But this was by Norman Thomas. Now, he died in 1968, but he was a leading American socialist. a 6-time presidential candidate for the Socialist Party of America. And the Socialist Party candidate said this in a 1944 speech. He was withdrawing from the presidential candidate. Said the American people will never knowingly adopt socialism. But under the name of liberalism, they will adopt every fragment of the socialist program until one day America will be a socialist nation without knowing how it happened. He went on to say, I no longer need to run as a presidential candidate for the Socialist Party. The Democratic Party has adopted our platform. He said the American people will one day wake up a socialist nation without knowing how it happened. Well, I think everyone understands watching this program surely is wondering, but there's no wonder as to how it happened. It's a lack of courage. It's like, what are you doing today to fight for freedom? What are you doing today to push back against tyranny? Right? Where is the courage? And we have a chronic shortage of courage. All right, guys, let me know, what do you think? Do we have enough courage to pull ourselves out of this nightmare situation? Let me know in the comments below. What else? I want to hear your thoughts. What is the state of the world? What do we need to do to fix it? What do we need to do to get people back to work? What do we need to do to get people to understand the basic facts that the proof is coming out? Like, again, just going back to courage. Ron DeSantis, governor of Florida, the courage that it took from him to be the only governor in the union to say, no, we're not doing these mask mandates. No, we're not doing these jab mandates. And now for him to come out the other side and his state have the lowest rate of COVID hospitalizations that there are, like, courage is rewarded. So let me hear from you today. What are you doing that takes courage today? I applaud you, whatever it is. What are you doing? What are you doing to make the world better? What are you doing to make your world better? What are you doing to make your finances better? Let me know what you are doing to have courage. Because in a world where that is the most limited supply, that has the most value. It's worked for Ron DeSantis. It's worked for Bitcoin holders. Hopefully it's worked for you and your investments. What are you doing that has courage? All right, guys, smash up that like button, hit that subscribe button, and I'll see you guys soon.